Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for attending this talk about team topology in practice, a journey of reteaming using architecture for flow instead of enjoying the sun. I would rather stay outside, to be honest. But yeah, thanks a lot. So in general, business growth, that is typically something that many organizations aim to achieve. And more customers usually means more revenue and more product demands, unlocking the team growth and unlocking system growth, which in turn also then potentially attracts even more customers. So a reinforcing feedback loop that many organizations aim to achieve. But there's always a but. With growth, there comes increasing complexities. And these complexities can slow down our flow of change and set limits to our business growth that we are aiming for. So bigger teams means more people to coordinate, increasing coordination efforts, introducing waiting times and delays. And as systems grow, they become more complex, and then they often become tightly coupled and accumulate technical debt, and also evolving eventually in a big ball of mud with messy model and no clear modularity boundaries, which makes it then difficult to establish clear ownership boundaries. And then teams often end up with many or too large parts of the system, and as a result, their team cognitive load is increasing, and when the team cognitive load is largely exceeded, it becomes a delivery bottleneck. And on top of that, teams are often forced to juggle between multiple concerns, particularly when they have to deal with a lot of unplanned work due to technical debt or due to lack of clear focus, so that they have to deal with a lot of context switches. And they all slow down our flow of changes and also limit our business growth. So to who of you does this situation of all the complexities block us to flow look familiar? So yeah, I would say a lot of hands up. So yeah, but the good thing is you are not alone. So a lot of organizations have to also struggle with these challenges. And also our client that Nina and me worked together with was facing the same challenges.
Yeah, so let me introduce you to our client, PirateShip. It's a company founded in 2014 that offers a cloud-based shipping software for small and medium-sized businesses, making shipping easy and affordable for them. Software is free to use, and the business model is based on partnerships with US shipping service providers. They operate in the US. So the company operates from 2 locations. Headquarters is in the US, but the software development happens in Germany, in Hamburg, where 2 of the founders live. And we worked with the German entity. There are around 30 developers employed as of now. And when we started to work with them, they had 3 vertically sliced feature teams and an infrastructure team. And PirateShip faced exactly the same challenges that Susanne just described. So the current team structure had reached its limit. The business was growing, teams were big, domains were big, and they knew that they wanted to hire more developers, so they planned for the next year to hire 10 more. And so they wanted to address these challenges. So our mission was, as external consultants, help the organization scale the teams and enable further growth, shifting from feature to product teams and also applying team topologies. And what's important to know about PirateShip is that they have already had a highly participatory culture. So they worked in agile teams that were self-managing, that were responsible for their own work processes. And this was crucial for our approach to the reorganization. And here's an overall view of a high level of the approach we used at PirateShip. We organized the work in 3 phases. We started with discovery and design, then went into the streamlined team formation, and then the platform team formation. But this wasn't a straight path. You see the dotted arrows, so sometimes we learned on the way and had to go back to previous phases. And what we used was a cell division approach. So the teams were emerging from the existing ones, letting it grow organically, rather than completely dismantling everything. And throughout each of the phases, the teams were actively participating through collaborative workshops, shaping their new future and new structure, rather than having the change imposed on them. Yeah, and now we'll walk you through each of the phases.
So let's address the discovery and design phase. That was the first phase where we started and where we tried to gain a shared understanding of the domain and also analyzing the status quo, the as-is situation. And then also this discovery and design phase also involved designing the ideal future as the to-be situation that we want to achieve. But it was not set in stone. Of course, during our journey, we were course correcting while we were proceeding. And when optimizing systems for flow, we need to consider that organizations are not only composed of technical aspects, but also of interconnected social aspects, and they can't be treated separately. Instead, they need to be aligned in order to be able to adapt to constantly changing circumstances. So we need to design, build, and evolve adaptive socio-technical systems that are optimized for fast flow of sustainable value and constant feedback. And one approach out of many that we applied here was combining patterns, practices, and principles from business strategy with Wardley Mapping. So Rich already highlighted this with user mapping as part of it. And then software design with domain-driven design and team organization with Team Topologies. And we combined it, or the overall phrase is architecture for flow. That is a holistic tool set that is also very complementary with other techniques. So we highlight this in this talk as well. So it typically begins with starting with the status quo and assessing the current flow of change. And it typically begins with the teams of today. And in an ideal case, in an ideal scenario, the teams shall fully own the entire end-to-end flow from first idea to delivering value to the customers with minimal interruptions and with minimal bottlenecks along the way. And teams often know what is slowing down their work. So meeting teams where they are and interviewing them about what is currently blocking your flow of work, that helps to identify potential impediments, potential blockers to flow that we want to mitigate. But not only blockers to flow, but also elements that support current flow should be collected during those interviews in order also to identify elements that we would like to preserve in the ideal future, in the to-be situation. So the elements that we want to keep. And the collaboratively collected pain points, blockers to flow, that we have gathered during these interviews, that is something that we can revisit later and determine what of those blockers we could mitigate and reduce, and what of those blockers to flow still needs some more attention, or even if new blockers might appear when we, for example, resolve one blocker, sometimes new blocker, like coming from theory of constraints, will appear that you have not seen before. So adaptive systems in general are designed to be amenable to change and that can evolve and easily respond to new and changing circumstances. And to be amenable to change and to be adaptive, that requires to architect for change and to leverage the power of small. And that means that we have to move away from a monolithic big ball of mud with messy model and no clear modularity boundaries, and instead that we need to leverage modularity with high functional cohesion and loose coupling by designing modular, well-encapsulated, loosely coupled systems. And which requires then to decompose our monolithic big ball of mud into modular components. And that brings us to bounded context of domain-driven design. A bounded context itself that helps to group related business behavior together, and it defines where a single domain model can be applied that encapsulates specific business logic of our subdomains. And those bounded contexts are enforcing high cohesion and modularity, and they also provide good domain logic specific schemes to split our system or monolithic big ball of mud into modular well encapsulated parts. And they also serve very well as ownership boundaries. We come to that one when we talk about the team perspective. And designing bounded contexts and domain models that usually involves a close collaboration between domain experts, domain practitioners, and the development teams. And there are different techniques available for designing the domain models and the bounded context. And one of them is EventStorming, a lightweight modeling technique based on color-coded sticky notes invented by Alberto Brandolini, and which allows to explore a complex business domain by mapping out domain events that express things that have happened in our domain along a chronological timeline. So in our case, we addressed, for example, questions such as, for example, the external customers, a user needs external customers were a shipper that want to prepare, buy, hand off, deliver, and claim a loss of a shipment. And so we started asking questions, what happens, for example, when we prepare a shipment, or what happens when we buy a shipment. So, and express this with domain events, for example, label printed, or a shipment picked up, or handed over, or a shipment delivered, and so on. And EventStorming itself, that helps us to gain a shared domain knowledge, and it's technology agnostic because it involves a close collaboration between domain experts and development teams. And it helps us also to identify potential candidates for bounded contexts. In our case of pirate ship, for example, we had the bounded context of packet management, shipment document handling, rating, pickup handling, and many more. And those modular bounded contexts then can be part of the solution space, representing then components or capabilities of our value chain that fulfill the user needs of our shipper directly or indirectly. And the shippers have as I mentioned before, to prepare, buy, hand off, track, and also claim a loss of a shipment. And the bounded contexts are aligned to customer-facing streams of changes that are driven then by these user needs. And also the bounded contexts represent good ownership boundaries for streamlined teams. And to maintain a clear ownership is to consider that one bounded context itself should be owned by one team only, so to avoid diffusion of ownership. However, one team can own multiple bounded contexts. And that requires then to cluster the identified bounded contexts that we have identified during our EventStorming sessions to cluster them together for team ownership scope. So after identifying those bounded contexts, the clustering of those bounded contexts began. And we also applied, again, collaborative sessions. And so the teams worked in groups together and worked on a variety of cluster suggestions. And during clustering, we applied some heuristics. For example, one heuristic was the shipment lifecycle. The other one was the change coupling or domain complexity, and also volatility that we applied. And these cluster suggestions where different teams were working on then served as valuable input for creating then the final cluster of bounded contexts that shaped then the domain proposal. And this domain proposal is then in turn then delivered then available input for the team formation process of the streamlined teams. Yeah, so I'll walk you now through the process of forming the streamlined teams based on the domain proposal. So the cell division or the formation of the teams happened in 2-day workshops.
where the team that was approaching the cell division sat together. So we had developers in the room. The teams have one product owner, and we had the CTO with us for the workshops. And Susanne and I developed some kind of a blueprint for these 2 days. And we always began with a hopes and fears session. So this was obviously also we wanted to highlight what the teams are hoping to get out of this, but also opening room for conversation about the hopes and concerns that the team members had with the change approaching. This was important for us because it also created psychological safety, because the team members knew they can also raise their concerns. And this was welcome. We then discussed the domain proposal. So we had one proposal that emerged from the previous step, from the analysis of the bounded context. And then here we first used the consent decision-making approach, which I'll explain in more detail shortly. So, and after reaching fundamental agreement on how we're going to split the domain for the 2 new teams, we conducted a skill mapping. So we looked at the 2 new team domains and checked what skills do the teams need in order to work effectively on these new domains. And then before moving into self-selection, we also clarified some of the framework conditions. So for example, how large should the teams be? The leadership set a limit of 7 people. Then what were the expectations from the leadership for the teams? How many new team members can be hired? Because this was also something we could factor into the picture. And then, the most exciting step maybe was the self-selection, where the team members could choose in which team they would like to work. And so we did it in a way that the team members noted their preference privately on Post-its. Once everybody was done, we revealed, or the team members revealed the Post-its, and then we did a check. Does this work? Does it match the skill mapping that we did previously? Also, does it work in terms of the distribution of the team members, the numbers? And then we again used consent decision-making to move forward, improve the proposal, and then in the end, we could define next step and come up with a timeline. So when do the teams actually start working? When will they have their kickoff workshops? What else do we need to think of? So I mentioned consent decision-making a couple of times. Who of you has heard about consent decision-making? So I already see a couple of arms. Let's look a little bit closer, because this was one of the key methods for us that allowed for us to do the participatory approach and stay in the flow. Many organizations struggle with finding the right balance in decision processes. So the quadrant you see on the slide shows different approaches. Consensus gives you high participation, but can be slow and really lead to decision paralysis. On the other hand, autocratic decisions are fast, but you can end up with minimal buy-in. So consent decision-making offers the sweet spot, high participation with reasonable speed. And the key principle isn't to get everybody agreeing, but ensuring there are no fundamental objections. And at Pirate Ship, the process was like this. We started with a proposal, we clarified questions, then did a round of reactions, and then asked, does anyone have a reasoned objection? And we distinguished between concerns that could be noted versus critical issues that we needed to address. And that made it necessary to adjust the proposal. And we applied this to the domain proposal, team formation, and platform decision. Moving forward, when proposals were safe enough to try rather than perfect. And we had always a little bit of feedback loop. You saw it at the beginning on the slide. So we sometimes moved back and forth. We collected feedback from the leadership. We had the collaborative sessions and feedback from the team, for example, through retrospectives. And after a couple of months, it became clear that a lot of the things we had aimed for, removing blockers of flow, had worked. So teams were reporting that they had more focus, closer collaboration, clearer responsibilities, and fewer context switches. but it was also clear that there was still some work to be done. So knowledge transfer was a thing that was still ongoing and needed improvement. The team domains did not match the code base. And it became pretty clear that the teams worked with a lot of shared components that lacked clear ownership.
So the challenges of the shared components or the lack of ownership thereof, that highlighted that the past work or the previous work of the Streamline team was quite diverted. On the one side, they served the external customers, the shippers, but on the other side, they also served the internal customers, their teams. And that emphasized the importance of forming platform teams that then are single-handedly responsible for providing self-service capabilities that the Streamline teams can easily consume to seamlessly deliver their work, and so that the Streamline teams then are able to shift the focus back on the flow of changes of the bounded context they are going to be responsible for. So, but before we can form a platform team, we also have to first identify potential platform capabilities. And that required to switch from the external customer view from the shipper with their user needs now to the internal customer views, where the teams, the Streamline teams, become now the customers or the users, and with their own set of user needs, such as developing their app, testing, building, deploying, running, securing, and monitoring their app. And they demand now for capabilities that fulfill this user need, or that enables them to deliver their work and fulfill their user needs seamlessly. So, which requires to identify services that are needed to support a reliable flow of change. And in the context of pirate ship, where there were, for example, capabilities around like application infrastructure, or there were development tooling, or there were, for example, CI/CD pipelines, or also, for example, observability capabilities that has to be provided as platform candidates. And as we did previously with the bounded context, the platform capabilities also need to be grouped and clustered together to form platform candidates. And each team worked then in a group again and work on a variety of cluster suggestions for potential platform candidates. And we also applied different heuristics here. For example, one of the was to follow the development lifecycle, or the lifecycle of the Streamline team's user needs, or, for example, involve technology stacks and so on. And these cluster suggestions from the various groups then served again as valuable input for deriving then a final cluster of platform candidates, shaping then yet again the platform proposal. And this platform proposal then became again the foundation for the team formation of the platform teams. And we applied the same participatory approach that we have described before, that Nina described before. We applied with the Streamline teams, with consent decision making, with skill mapping, with self-selection, and more. So we applied the same process.
Yeah. So now we're coming to a conclusion. The journey of pirate ship is still ongoing. What we would like to share some of the insights and learnings that we've made on our way so far. So, participation isn't free. So, does it pay off? Susanne and I would say absolutely, and also our client would give the same answer. So it requires some investment, and maybe we can have a look at what pirate ship invested. So obviously, of course, time. So multiple workshops, from EventStorming sessions to the team formation, pulling people away from their day-to-day work. Second, the structured, facilitated approach. And third, the genuine engagement from everybody involved, like deeply thinking about the domains and the teams. But the result, however, far outweighed these investments. The teams developed a genuine ownership by driving their own change rather than having it imposed on them. We created better solutions through the multiple perspectives that were involved. So we had the technical insights, but also the business process knowledge to create boundaries for the teams that respected both realities. And most importantly, we believe the organization developed adaptability as a core capability. So not just applying a new structure, but also developing a muscle to evolve continuously as business needs change. And what we also discovered is that when teams shape their own future and their own structure, implementation follows with remarkably less friction. So before we wrap up, one key point, a disclaimer that is important to us. So there's no silver bullet, there's no right way to reorganize team or approach scaling of teams. What worked for Pirate Ship in our case fit their culture, but every organization is different. So yeah, real success comes from making stuff work in your context and adapt concepts to your needs. But here are the key insights we derive from the work at Pirate Ship. So deep understanding of business strategy, product, and domain is the foundation for any successful reorganization. Before discussing team structures, we invested time in understanding these aspects through Wardley Mapping, EventStorming. And a common pitfall is jumping straight into the team formation without having this foundation. Organizations often try to change everything at once with a Big Bang reorganization. We found an incremental approach, the cell division approach, allowed for organic adaptation. And finally, we learned that team boundaries can change relatively quickly, but architecture takes time to evolve. So organizations must factor in the time and acknowledge this lag. Without this alignment of architecture and teams, the teams face friction as they work with a code base that does not match their new responsibilities. And we'll close with something that we believe is also important from our work, shifting from seeing reorganization as a one-time event to embracing it as a continuous capability. So a couple of months after our initial work with Pirate Ship, a team proactively brought up their own cell division because they saw blockers of flow and started to discuss this with the leadership. And this, for us, was a sign that they're really building the internal ability to adapt to changing circumstances. And this evolution is especially critical in today's fast-changing world. No team structure will remain perfect forever. What matters is building the capability to evolve continuously as circumstances change.
And yes, we could go on and on and on, but in the interest of time, we can't dive deeply into every aspect that we have gathered with our client engagement. But you collected a set of series of references that allows you to get more insights. For example, Nina's blog article about this case study, the constant decision-making framework, and then also an architecture for flow canvas that is an structured approach that I developed in order to analyze to optimize the system for fast flow of change, starting with your status quo and also designing your ideal future, applying then Wardley Mapping, seamlessly domain-driven design, Wardley Mapping, and Team Topologies, with, of course, referencing their books, but also I'm also writing a book about it. I already told it a couple of fast flows ago, but I keep my finger crossed that it will be published soon. So please, I can approach me if you have a question. But also, we would like to thank you for your attention, and also we provided a QR code for downloading the slide deck. If you're interested, you can download it right away. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but we are of course around. So please, join us or ask us about questions that you have about our experiences. We would like to also exchange experiences that you have made. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.